This video will walk you through the anatomy structures that you need to know for the practical portion of the endocrine test. You will need to be able to spell these structures correctly, including identifying if it is a left or right structure if you have two of them, so be sure to practice spelling and location. The first three structures that we will go over should be familiar to you from the nervous system. I do recommend learning these structures from superior to inferior, as it will also help you to reinforce their relative locations within the body. Superiorly in the brain, we know we've already learned three structures here: the pituitary, the pineal gland, and the hypothalamus. As you move down the body, just below the larynx, you'll find the thyroid and the parathyroid. Sitting right on top of the heart, you'll find the thymus. Behind the stomach, you'll find the pancreas. Sitting retroperitoneal, or posterior to the abdominopelvic or peritoneal cavity, you'll find the kidneys here and here. And remember that as you are learning structures that you have two of, you need to make sure that you clarify which one you are looking at. So if I was pointing, for example, to this kidney, you would need to make sure and tell me that that is the patient's right kidney, and this one over here is the left kidney. Sitting right on top of those kidneys here and here are the adrenal glands. And don't worry about the spelling just yet. We'll get into each one individually very soon. And then in individuals that have testes, they are located in the scrotal sac down here. And in individuals that have ovaries, they will be found in that abdominal pelvic cavity over here. So let's get into each of these different glands. Now, the ones in the brain should be pretty familiar to you. So you should be able to identify that the one up here that we're seeing right there and right there, that would be the pineal gland. That the larger one that's anterior to the thalamus here is the pituitary gland. And then just kind of posterior and superior to that pituitary, right about in there and there, attached to that pituitary gland by the infundibulum is the hypothalamus. Make sure that you're practicing the spelling of these structures, because this practical portion on the test will look very similar to previous practicals that you've had where you have to fill in the name of the structure and spell it correctly. The thymus, we know, sits right on top of the heart. So over here we have a model of the heart, and then you can see that thymus sitting right on top of it. Now, as mentioned in the lecture videos, the thymus atrophies as you age. So in an adult, you can see there's my larynx or voice box right there. My thyroid and parathyroid sit right below it. And then there's your adult thymus. But in a child or an infant, notice that the thymus is extremely large. So as you age, that structure is atrophying or getting smaller, and therefore less effective as well. Now, just above that thymus right here, we said is your thyroid and parathyroid, kind of shaped a little bit like a butterfly. If I'm looking at the anterior view here, then I can see the thyroid gland. And if I flip that over and look at the posterior side of the thyroid gland, you'll notice that there are four small glands kind of embedded in that thyroid gland. And those all make up the parathyroid glands, which, as you know from your lecture videos, helps to control blood calcium. Now, as you move down into the abdominal pelvic cavity, you'll find the pancreas, which is sitting right behind the stomach here. And in this model, it would be right here. And if you don't know what you're looking for on these models, it can almost look like adipose tissue or fatty tissue, but it is actually a gland. And that pancreas, in addition to producing hormones that regulate blood sugar, helps to digest food by producing enzymes that get dumped into this kind of curving structure right here or right here, which is the first part of your small intestine known as the duodenum. Now, posterior to your abdominal pelvic cavity, in the retroperitoneal space, is where you'll find your kidneys and your adrenal or suprarenal glands. And you can see this right kidney right here, kind of tucked behind that duodenum there. And then you'll notice up on this model, you can see a kidney there, a kidney back there. You can just see the part of the suprarenal gland sitting on top of it here. In this model, the suprarenal gland is this structure right on top of that kidney. If we take this model right here and remove the spleen, the pancreas, and that duodenum, what we see is our inferior vena cava, our descending aorta, and then attached to that, we see over here the left kidney. We see over here the right kidney. And then sitting on top of that right kidney would be my right adrenal or my right suprarenal gland. And sitting on top of my left kidney right here would be my left adrenal or left suprarenal gland. From a different perspective, on a different model, over here on this side, we see again that kind of pancreas tucked in here. Let's get a different color pen to see if it shows up a little better. So we can see that pancreas right there. We can see that duodenum right there. This is my spleen. And then behind that, if I remove this pancreas and duodenum and spleen, I'm going to see here my right kidney, my left kidney, my right suprarenal or adrenal gland, and my left suprarenal or adrenal gland right there. If we look at our reproductive glands, up here we have a model that shows a urinary bladder right here, a vaginal canal, the uterus, a fallopian tube, and then kind of tucked right at the end of that fallopian tube right there, that is going to be this individual's right ovary. And then over on this model right here, we see that you've got the penis here. It kind of goes back. We've got the prostate gland. The urinary bladder is kind of cut open here so that you can see inside. And then you have connecting down, we're kind of missing part of the spermatic cord, but then you can see here, you have this individual's left testis. Now, testes is technically plural. So if I can only see one, I'm looking at the left testis or the right testis. Now notice that I didn't say male or female reproductive organs. You can have an individual who is genetically male, has a Y chromosome, but because of lack of testosterone during development, the individual ends up looking like they have external female reproductive organs. They have a canal that looks like a vagina, but then it's just a dead end, and they don't have these structures here, and they actually have undescended testes. So would that individual be considered male because they have testes, or because they have a Y chromosome, or would they be considered female because externally they look female? I can tell you that on the birth certificate, the doctor is probably going to write female because we don't tend to do genetic tests on newborns. You can also end up with an individual that is genetically female and has two X chromosomes. However, because of an excess of testosterone, then they end up with an enlarged clitoris and enlarged labial folds that actually appear at birth as if they may have a scrotal sac and a kind of reduced penis, and therefore get marked on a birth certificate as male. And these individuals are often raised as male, even though they do in fact have a vaginal canal, a uterus, and ovaries. So rather than making things very binary, I'm just going to try to avoid using the terms male and female when I'm referring to the reproductive organs, because there is a tremendous amount of variability. In fact, I would say it's safe to say that the reproductive organs vary as often as the individuals themselves vary. Now, if you have somebody with a uterus that becomes pregnant, as that baby is developing, they also have a structure developing here that this arrow is pointing to, and that is called the placenta. And the placenta is a very important endocrine organ during pregnancy, which you will learn about in your next class. So practice these different reproductive structures, go through and look at the unlabeled model images, and make sure that you can practice naming those for the practical portion of this test.